20,000 fans packed into one of the world's most iconic venues for Whitney Houston's sold-out concert. The energy was electric, the crowd was euphoric, and Whitney was delivering the performance everyone had paid to see. Midway through the show, during her signature song, "I Wanna Dance with Somebody," the entire arena was on its feet dancing and singing along. But then Whitney noticed something in the third row that made her stop singing mid-verse. A young woman in a wheelchair was trying desperately to dance, her arms moving to the rhythm while tears streamed down her face. What Whitney Houston did next shocked the entire arena into complete silence, then moved 20,000 people to tears in a moment that would redefine what it means to use fame for something that truly matters. If you want to witness the moment when a superstar chose compassion over spectacle and changed someone's life forever, hit that subscribe button right now, because this story will restore your faith in humanity. Her name was Jennifer Martinez, and at 23 years old, she had spent the last 7 years fighting a battle that most people couldn't imagine. Jennifer had been a competitive dancer before a drunk driver crashed into her car on a rainy night in 1989, severing her spinal cord at the thoracic level and paralyzing her from the waist down. In an instant, everything that had defined her identity, her ability to move, to dance, to express herself through her body, was stolen from her. The physical rehabilitation had been brutal, learning to navigate the world from a wheelchair, dealing with chronic pain, accepting that the dancing career she had worked toward since childhood was gone forever. But the psychological devastation was even worse. Jennifer had fallen into a deep depression in the months following her accident, unable to imagine a future where she couldn't dance. Whitney Houston's music had been Jennifer's lifeline during those darkest days. When she felt like giving up completely, when the pain and grief seemed unbearable, Jennifer would put on her headphones and listen to Whitney's voice. There was something about the power and emotion in Whitney's singing that made Jennifer feel less alone in her suffering. "I Wanna Dance with Somebody" had become particularly meaningful to her, a bittersweet reminder of what she had lost, but also a connection to the joy she used to feel when she could move freely. Jennifer would close her eyes and remember what it felt like to dance, to feel her body responding to music, to express emotion through movement. Whitney's voice became the soundtrack to her memories of the person she used to be. For 7 years, Jennifer had avoided concerts and dance performances, finding it too painful to watch other people do what she could no longer do. But in the summer of 1996, something shifted inside her. She decided that hiding from music and dancing wasn't protecting her, it was keeping her trapped in grief. When she learned that Whitney Houston would be performing at Madison Square Garden, Jennifer made a decision that terrified her. She was going to attend the concert, sit in her wheelchair surrounded by 20,000 people who could dance, and face her loss head-on. Her mother, Maria Martinez, was worried about Jennifer's emotional state and tried to talk her out of going. "Mija, are you sure about this? Watching everyone else dance while you're in the wheelchair, won't that just make you feel worse?" But Jennifer was determined. "Mama, I need to do this. I need to prove to myself that I can still experience joy from music even if I can't dance anymore. And if I fall apart, at least I'll have tried." Jennifer and her mother arrived at Madison Square Garden 3 hours before the show, wanting to get settled in their seats without the chaos of the last-minute crowd rush. They had third-row seats, close enough to see Whitney clearly, but not so close that Jennifer would feel exposed or self-conscious about being in her wheelchair. As the arena filled up around them, Jennifer felt a complex mix of emotions. Excitement about seeing Whitney Houston perform live, anxiety about being surrounded by so many people who would be dancing while she couldn't, and a deep sadness about the fundamental unfairness of what had been taken from her. When the lights finally dimmed and Whitney appeared on stage in a shimmering silver gown, Jennifer felt her heart racing. This was really happening. She was going to watch Whitney Houston perform the songs that had saved her life, and she was going to find a way to be okay with experiencing them from her wheelchair. The first half of Whitney's concert was spectacular. Song after song, she delivered her characteristic power and emotion, and the crowd responded with overwhelming enthusiasm. Jennifer found herself getting lost in the music, singing along quietly, feeling the vibrations of the bass through her wheelchair, connecting with the songs in a way she hadn't allowed herself to in years. For those first 45 minutes, Jennifer almost forgot about her wheelchair, about her paralysis, about everything except the pure joy of hearing Whitney's voice live. But then Whitney began the opening notes of I Wanna Dance with Somebody, and everything changed. The entire arena erupted, 20,000 people jumping to their feet, dancing, moving, celebrating. Jennifer felt the familiar pang of grief and loss as she watched everyone around her doing what she could no longer do. Her mother noticed the tears starting to form in Jennifer's eyes and reached over to hold her hand, but Jennifer shook her head. She wasn't crying from sadness this time. She was crying because despite everything, despite the wheelchair and the paralysis and the loss, she still wanted to dance. Jennifer began moving her upper body to the rhythm, swaying her torso and shoulders, lifting her arms and moving them in time with the music. It wasn't the full-body dancing she used to do, but it was movement, it was expression, it was her way of participating in the collective joy happening around her. She closed her eyes and let the music wash over her, moving her arms with increasing confidence and freedom. For those few minutes, Jennifer wasn't thinking about what she had lost. She was focused on what she still had, the ability to feel music, to express emotion through whatever movement her body could still make, to connect with something beautiful despite her limitations. She opened her eyes and looked up at Whitney on stage, mouthing the words to the song, her arms raised above her head, moving with as much joy and energy as her damaged body could produce. That's when Whitney Houston noticed her. In a sea of 20,000 dancing fans, Whitney's eyes locked onto Jennifer Martinez in the third row. What Whitney saw was a young woman in a wheelchair with tears streaming down her face, arms raised high, moving her upper body with such intensity and passion that it was clear this wasn't just dancing. This was something deeper, more necessary, more profound. Whitney had seen countless fans dancing at her concerts over the years, but there was something about Jennifer's movement that struck her as different. Perhaps it was the visible effort involved, the way every gesture seemed to carry more weight and intention than the casual dancing happening around her. Perhaps it was the expression of pure joy mixed with grief on Jennifer's face. Whatever it was, Whitney felt compelled to acknowledge this young woman who was dancing with such fierce determination, despite obvious physical limitations. Whitney did something she had never done before in her entire career. She stopped singing mid-verse of I Wanna Dance with Somebody, the song that thousands of people had paid to hear performed perfectly from start to finish. The music continued playing, but Whitney's voice went silent as she walked to the edge of the stage and pointed directly at Jennifer. The crowd around Jennifer noticed Whitney's gesture and began to quiet down, confused about what was happening. Jennifer, still moving to the music with her eyes partially closed, didn't immediately realize that Whitney was pointing at her. Her mother gently touched her arm and said, "Mija, Whitney is looking at you." Jennifer opened her eyes fully and saw Whitney Houston standing at the edge of the Madison Square Garden stage, pointing directly at her wheelchair, with an expression of curiosity and compassion on her face. Whitney picked up her wireless microphone and spoke directly to Jennifer, her voice carrying clearly through the massive arena's sound system. "You in the wheelchair, what's your name, sweetheart?" The question hung in the air as 20,000 people turned to look at Jennifer Martinez sitting in the third row in her wheelchair. Jennifer felt her face flush with embarrassment and emotion. She wasn't someone who sought attention or wanted to be noticed in crowds. Being singled out by Whitney Houston in front of 20,000 people was overwhelming in ways she couldn't have anticipated. Her mother squeezed her hand encouragingly, and Jennifer managed to call back, "Jennifer," her voice small and shaky. Whitney smiled warmly and said, "Jennifer, I've been watching you dance from up here, and I have to tell you something. The way you're moving, the joy and passion you're putting into it, you're dancing harder than almost anyone else in this entire arena." The crowd murmured with appreciation, some people around Jennifer turning to look at her with newfound awareness and respect. But Whitney wasn't finished. "Can I ask you something, Jennifer? Would you like to come up here on this stage and dance with me?" The question landed like a thunderbolt. The arena went completely silent as everyone processed what Whitney had just offered. Jennifer sat frozen in her wheelchair, unable to believe what she had just heard. Whitney Houston was inviting her, a paralyzed girl in a wheelchair, to come on stage and dance. The absurdity of it mixed with the beauty of the gesture left Jennifer speechless. Her mother started crying immediately, understanding the profound significance of what Whitney was offering. This wasn't just an invitation to join the show. This was Whitney Houston publicly declaring that Jennifer's dancing mattered, that her movement was valid and valuable despite her disability, that she belonged in the celebration even though she couldn't move the same way everyone else could. Jennifer finally found her voice and called back, "But I can't walk. I'm in a wheelchair." Whitney's response would become one of the most quoted moments in concert history. "Baby, you don't need to walk to dance. You've been dancing beautifully from right where you are. Now I'm asking if you want to do it up here with me so everyone can see how it's really done." The crowd erupted in thunderous applause and cheering as the full weight of Whitney's gesture became clear. This wasn't pity or condescension. This was genuine respect and admiration from one of the world's greatest performers for a young woman who had found a way to dance despite circumstances that would have stopped most people from even trying. Security personnel immediately moved toward Jennifer to help facilitate getting her and her wheelchair onto the stage. Madison Square Garden's crew had to quickly figure out logistics they had never dealt with before. How to safely and quickly get someone in a wheelchair from the third row up onto the elevated stage platform. The entire process took about 5 minutes, during which Whitney kept the crowd engaged by talking about the power of music to transcend physical limitations and bring people together. "You know," Whitney said, while they waited for Jennifer to be brought up, "I've performed for millions of people all over the world, and I've seen every kind of dancing you can imagine. But what I just witnessed from Jennifer down there in row 3, that's what real dancing looks like. Dancing isn't about perfect choreography or athletic ability. It's about letting the music move through you and expressing what you feel. Jennifer was doing that more authentically than most trained dancers I've ever seen." When Jennifer finally appeared on stage, being lifted up the stage stairs in her wheelchair by crew members, the crowd's applause was deafening. Whitney walked over to Jennifer, knelt down beside her wheelchair so they were at eye level, and took both of Jennifer's hands in hers. What Whitney said next was captured by the wireless microphone, but was clearly meant to be a private moment between two people. "Jennifer, thank you for being brave enough to come up here," Whitney said softly, her words barely audible over the crowd noise but picked up clearly by the microphone. "I know this probably feels scary and overwhelming, but I want you to know something. When I saw you dancing down there with such joy and passion, it reminded me why I do this. It reminded me that music is about connection and emotion, not about being perfect or meeting some standard. You were the most authentic person dancing in this entire arena, and I wanted everyone to see that." Jennifer, overcome with emotion, could barely speak. "Whitney, your music saved my life. After my accident, when I wanted to give up, listening to you sing made me want to keep trying. I came here tonight to prove to myself that I could still experience joy from music even though I can't dance the way I used to." Whitney's eyes filled with tears as she processed Jennifer's words. "Baby, you are dancing the way you were meant to. Your dancing is perfect exactly as it is." What happened next would be replayed millions of times in the years that followed, becoming one of the most iconic moments in live performance history. Whitney stood up and addressed the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, Jennifer and I are about to show you what real dancing looks like. I want everyone in this arena to understand something. Dance isn't about your legs or your feet or your ability to spin or jump. Dance is about your heart, your spirit, your willingness to let music move you. And nobody, I mean nobody, does that better than this beautiful young woman right here." Whitney signaled to her band to restart. "I want to dance with somebody" from the beginning. But this time, instead of performing the song as a high-energy pop anthem for a massive crowd, Whitney transformed it into something more intimate and meaningful. She stood beside Jennifer's wheelchair and began to sing directly to her, making eye contact, smiling, encouraging her. Jennifer, no longer self-conscious or embarrassed, began to move. She swayed her upper body, lifted her arms, moved her head to the rhythm, and let the music flow through the parts of her body that could still respond. Whitney, instead of doing her usual elaborate choreography, mirrored Jennifer's movements. When Jennifer raised her arms, Whitney raised hers. When Jennifer swayed left, Whitney swayed left. The most famous pop star in the world was dancing in perfect synchronization with a paralyzed girl in a wheelchair, and the effect was absolutely mesmerizing. 20,000 people watched in stunned silence as this unprecedented duet unfolded. This wasn't a superstar taking pity on a disabled fan. This was two people connecting through music and movement, each bringing their own unique expression to the dance. Whitney was following Jennifer's lead. showing everyone in that arena that Jennifer's way of dancing was just as valid and beautiful as any professional choreography. As the song built toward its climactic chorus, something extraordinary happened. The entire crowd, inspired by what they were witnessing, began to modify their own dancing to match Jennifer and Whitney's style. Instead of the usual jumping and elaborate moves, 20,000 people began to sway, to move their arms, to focus on upper body expression. It was as if the entire Madison Square Garden audience had collectively decided that tonight they would dance Jennifer's way, in solidarity and celebration of what she had shown them was possible. The visual effect was stunning. 20,000 people moving in gentle, synchronized waves, all honoring this young woman who had taught them that dancing was about spirit, not ability. When the song finally ended, the ovation that followed lasted nearly 15 minutes. People were crying, hugging each other, and cheering not just for Whitney but for Jennifer, for the moment of profound humanity they had all witnessed, for the reminder that music belongs to everyone regardless of physical ability. Whitney Houston didn't let Jennifer leave the stage immediately after their dance. Instead, she brought over a stool and sat down next to Jennifer's wheelchair, creating an intimate conversation space in front of 20,000 people. "Jennifer, I need to ask you something," Whitney said, still holding Jennifer's hand. "When you had your accident and lost the ability to walk, to dance the way you used to, did you think you'd ever feel joy from music again?" Jennifer thought about the question carefully before answering. "Honestly, no. For a long time, I avoided music completely because it reminded me of everything I'd lost. I thought dancing was something I used to be able to do, past tense, finished. Tonight was the first concert I've attended since my accident 7 years ago." Whitney nodded, understanding the courage that decision had required. "What changed? What made you decide to come here tonight?" Jennifer's answer would later be shared by disability rights advocates and therapists working with trauma survivors around the world. "I realized that avoiding music wasn't protecting me from pain. It was just adding another loss on top of the one I'd already experienced. The drunk driver who hit me took away my ability to walk, but I was letting that accident also take away my ability to experience joy from music. I decided I wasn't going to let that happen anymore. So I came here tonight determined to find a way to connect with your music even from my wheelchair. I had no idea it would lead to this." Whitney stood up and addressed the crowd one more time. "I want everyone here to understand what Jennifer just taught us. When life takes something from you, when circumstances rob you of an ability or an opportunity, you have a choice. You can let that loss define everything that comes after, or you can find new ways to experience joy and meaning." Jennifer chose to find a new way to dance, and in doing so, she reminded all of us what dancing really means. The immediate aftermath of that Madison Square Garden concert was extraordinary. News of Whitney's gesture spread rapidly through media outlets, with footage of the performance going viral years before social media would make such things commonplace. The story resonated far beyond the music industry, being picked up by disability rights organizations, rehabilitation centers, and advocacy groups. Jennifer Martinez became an overnight symbol of resilience and adaptive creativity, though she was initially uncomfortable with the attention. Within weeks of the concert, Jennifer was invited to speak at rehabilitation centers about her journey from despair to finding new ways to express herself through movement. She discovered that her story gave hope to people who were struggling to imagine life after disability. "If Jennifer can find a way to dance again, maybe I can find a way to paint again, to play music again, to do the things I loved even if I have to do them differently now." Her message wasn't about overcoming disability or returning to normal. It was about accepting change while refusing to let loss completely define your future. Whitney Houston, deeply moved by her interaction with Jennifer, began incorporating disability awareness into her concerts and charitable work. She partnered with the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation to create a program called Dance Without Limits that provided adaptive dance instruction for people with spinal cord injuries and other mobility impairments. Whitney funded the program generously and made surprise visits to classes, dancing alongside participants and reinforcing the message that movement and music belong to everyone. "Meeting Jennifer changed how I think about performance and who it's for," Whitney said in a 1997 interview. "I used to think my job was to entertain people, to give them a show worth the price of admission. Now I understand that my real job is to create moments where people feel seen and valued, where they're reminded of their own strength and beauty. Jennifer taught me that. The cultural impact of Whitney's gesture extended into the broader entertainment industry. Other performers began to make their concerts more accessible and inclusive, incorporating wheelchair-accessible areas closer to the stage and actively acknowledging disabled fans in their audiences. The incident sparked conversations about representation and inclusion in music, leading to more visible participation of disabled artists in mainstream music production. Jennifer's moment on stage with Whitney became a reference point in discussions about what genuine inclusion looks like, not just providing access, but actively celebrating and centering the contributions of people with disabilities. For Jennifer personally, the experience was transformative in ways that went far beyond the immediate thrill of dancing on stage with her idol. In the months following the concert, she began taking adaptive dance classes and discovered a community of disabled dancers who were creating new forms of movement and expression. She eventually became a certified adaptive dance instructor herself, working primarily with recently injured spinal cord patients who were struggling to imagine a future that included joy and creativity. The relationship between Whitney Houston and Jennifer Martinez didn't end when the concert did. Whitney and Jennifer stayed in touch regularly, with Whitney calling to check on Jennifer's progress and offering encouragement during difficult times. When Jennifer completed her certification as an adaptive dance instructor, Whitney surprised her by showing up at the graduation ceremony and personally presenting her with the certificate. "This woman taught me more about dancing in one night than I learned in 20 years of professional training," Whitney told the assembled crowd. "She showed me that the best dancing comes from the heart, not from perfect technique or physical ability. She changed how I think about my own art, and I'm honored to witness her changing how others think about theirs." Whitney attended several of Jennifer's adaptive dance classes over the years, participating as a student rather than a celebrity visitor, learning new ways of moving and expressing herself through dance. The video footage of Whitney and Jennifer dancing together at Madison Square Garden has been viewed hundreds of millions of times across various platforms and formats over the years since that night. It has been featured in documentaries about Whitney's life, in disability rights campaigns, in rehabilitation center orientations, and in countless social media posts about compassion and inclusion. The comment sections on these videos consistently reflect the profound emotional impact the moment continues to have on viewers. People share stories of their own disabilities and how seeing Jennifer dance with Whitney gave them hope. Parents of disabled children express gratitude for a public example of their children being celebrated rather than pitied. Able-bodied viewers talk about how the performance changed their understanding of what dancing means and who gets to participate in joy. When Whitney Houston died in 2012, Jennifer Martinez was invited to speak at the public memorial service. Standing at the podium with her wheelchair visible to everyone in the arena and everyone watching the broadcast, Jennifer shared what Whitney's gesture had meant to her life. "In August 1996, I went to a Whitney Houston concert prepared to grieve what I had lost. Instead, Whitney showed me what I still had. She didn't cure my paralysis or give me back my ability to walk. What she did was much more important. She showed me and 20,000 other people that my way of dancing was beautiful and valid exactly as it was. She transformed my disability from something I was ashamed of into something I could celebrate as part of who I am. Every person I've taught to dance since that night, every newly injured patient I've helped find joy in movement again. That's all because Whitney Houston saw me, really saw me, and decided that my dancing mattered enough to stop her show and share it with the world." The Dance Without Limits program that Whitney founded after meeting Jennifer has served over 10,000 people with mobility impairments in the years since its creation. It has expanded from a single location in New York to 12 cities across the United States, offering free adaptive dance classes and performance opportunities for people with spinal cord injuries, cerebral palsy, and other conditions affecting movement. Jennifer Martinez serves as the program's national director, having built a career dedicated to helping others discover what she learned that night at Madison Square Garden, that joy and expression are possible regardless of physical limitation. The program's motto, taken from what Whitney said on stage that night, is displayed prominently in every studio. You don't need to walk to dance. You just need to feel the music and let it move you. The broader cultural conversation about disability and inclusion in entertainment can trace a direct line back to that August night in 1996, when Whitney Houston stopped her show for a wheelchair-bound fan. The moment forced millions of people to reconsider their assumptions about who gets to participate in joy, who gets to be celebrated, and what beautiful movement looks like. It challenged the narrow definitions of dancing and performing that had excluded so many people from full participation in music culture. Most importantly, it demonstrated that genuine inclusion isn't about making special accommodations or lowering standards. It's about recognizing that there are many different ways to experience and express joy, and that those differences make the collective experience richer for everyone involved. The story of Whitney Houston stopping her Madison Square Garden concert to dance with Jennifer Martinez is ultimately a story about seeing and being seen. In a world that often renders disabled people invisible or treats them as objects of pity rather than full participants in life, Whitney's gesture was revolutionary. She didn't just acknowledge Jennifer's presence in the audience. She centered it, celebrated it, and elevated it to a position of honor in front of 20,000 people. She used her platform and her power not to spotlight her own generosity, but to shine a light on Jennifer's beauty and strength. That distinction matters enormously. This wasn't about Whitney Houston being a good person or doing charity. This was about Whitney recognizing genuine artistry and authentic expression when she saw it, regardless of the form it took, and making sure everyone else saw it too. For the 20,000 people who witnessed that moment in person, and the millions who have experienced it through recordings since, Whitney and Jennifer's dance offered a vision of what the world could be. A world where difference is celebrated rather than hidden, where people are valued for who they are rather than what they can do according to narrow standards, where joy is accessible to everyone regardless of physical ability. The standing ovation that followed their dance wasn't just appreciation for a touching moment. It was a collective commitment to carrying that vision forward, to seeing people the way Whitney saw Jennifer, with recognition of their inherent worth and beauty. In the years since that night, countless people have made different choices about how they treat and think about disabled people because they witnessed or heard about what happened when Whitney Houston stopped her show for Jennifer Martinez. That ripple effect, that gradual shift in consciousness and behavior, is the true legacy of one spontaneous gesture of recognition and respect. This incredible story reminds us that the moments that matter most are often the ones that break the script, that defy expectations, that choose human connection over professional performance. Whitney Houston could have finished her song as planned, acknowledged Jennifer with a wave or a dedication, and moved on with the show. Instead, she stopped everything, brought Jennifer on stage, and created a moment that would change thousands of lives in ways she couldn't have predicted. That choice to prioritize one person's dignity and joy over the expectations of 20,000 paying customers required courage and conviction. It required a willingness to risk looking foolish or disrupting the professional polish that superstardom demands. But in taking that risk, Whitney gave the world something far more valuable than a perfect concert performance. She gave us a blueprint for how to see each other, how to celebrate each other, and how to create space for everyone to dance in whatever way their body allows. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to remember that they are seen, valued, and beautiful exactly as they are.